Well, good morning, everybody. I see that we have quorum, so I want to welcome everybody to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting of June 8th, 2021. And I'd like to call the members to order. Because of the continuing state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom. Though we are meeting virtually, the land on which Ottawa is built upon is unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. As noted earlier, this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom. Those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also watch it live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. A reminder to participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this subcommittee, residents may still make written submissions to council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator by calling 613-580-2424, extension 22953. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. To date, I have received no regrets. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they are called.
Just a note, I don't think Carolyn can hear us.
For the roll call, Member Halsell.
Present.
Member Podolsky.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Member Conforti.
Present.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Vice Chair Quinn. I believe you might have audio. In any event, the Vice Chair's in attendance. Chair King.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair, I have a declaration. For item A on information previously distributed, the proposed Alexandria Bridge replacement. I am an employee of the National Capital Commission, and the NCC is involved in the planning and public consultation, so there is a perceived indirect conflict.
Well, thank you for that declaration. Thank you, Member Hassel. If there are no more declarations of interest, are the minutes of Tuesday, May 11th, 2021 confirmed?
Carried.
Confirmed. Thank you. So our first area of focus is planning, infrastructure, and economic development, right-of-way, heritage, and urban design services. The first item before us is an application for demolition and new construction at 321 Cloverdale Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Just before Mr. Juarez starts his presentation, I just wanted to introduce him to the committee. So Luis is a new heritage planner with the team. So this is his first time before the committee with all of you. So he's a new heritage planner 2 on our team and started with us in January. So he's gotten off the hook until now, but here he is, and I'll pass it over to him.
Great, thank you. Through you, Chair, good morning, and thanks for the introduction, Leslie. This item concerns an application to alter 321 Cloverdale Road. So 321 Cloverdale Road is a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing Grade 2 dwelling and construct a new 2-story split-level dwelling on the property. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on the west side of Cloverdale Road, across from Fairview Avenue, and situated along a curve in the road and above the acacia escarpment. As the map on the right of this slide shows, the property is indicated in the tan color, meaning that it is classified as a Grade 2 property in the Heritage Conservation District. There's also 2 Grade 1 properties that immediately abut the subject property, including 480 Fernhill Road to the west and 275 Cloverdale Road to the south. Next slide, please. The existing dwelling on the property is 1.5 stories in height, clad in stucco, and contains a rectangular shaped plan and steeply pitched roof. The house was originally constructed in 1930. However, 3 later additions altered the dwelling's original rectangular plan, which is visible on the aerial image to the left. The additions include the construction of a double carport and on the interior side elevation and the covering of the porch along the front elevation, which were both constructed in 1964 and shown to the image on the right. There's also a 1-story kitchen addition in the rear, constructed in 1989. Next slide, please. The landscape character of the property includes a large mature silver maple tree that abuts the adjacent Grade 1 property to the south and shown on the image to the right, mature cedar hedges along the property lines, a large open lawn across the front and side yards that abut Cloverdale Road, and typical along this section of Cloverdale Road, the dwelling is placed above the escarpment and above the roadway. Next slide, please. This slide shows several components of the proposed new dwelling and associated landscape design. So you'll see that the site plan has an area that's shaded in gray, which indicates the footprint of the proposed dwelling. The darker shade signifies where the house is 2 stories. The dashed red line indicates the footprint of the existing house. The red X's indicate the 5 mature trees proposed for removal, and the green tree icons indicate the 9 trees that will be retained. The proposed replacement trees will be shown in the next slide. The dwelling design includes an attached sunken 2-car garage, which is located in the same vicinity as the existing garage, and a new driveway with similar placement to the existing driveway, but shifted away from the silver maple. I'd also like to note at this point that the report incorrectly referred to the driveway as reverse sloped. So while the driveway is sunken, it does maintain a positive 2% slope towards the street property line. Landscape-wise on this slide, you'll also see the addition of an in-ground pool and associated wooden deck and flagstone patio in the rear yard, and the retention of the silver maple along with the open lawn and a proposed entry terrace feature along the front. Next slide, please. This slide shows the landscape plan. As previously noted, there will be 5 mature trees proposed for removal and 12 replacement trees of appropriate size and species in accordance with the city's tree protection bylaw. 9 existing mature trees will also be retained, including the hedges along the property lines. And the hardscape materials used for the pool deck, patio, and walkways will be permeable. I'd also like to note at this point that the report and the landscape plan indicate 11 tree replacements. However, the city's forester identified an additional tree replacement requirement for the right-of-way since then. So the applicant has agreed to provide the additional tree, which will be reflected in a subsequent landscape plan to be approved through delegated authority. Next slide, please. This slide shows the elevation submitted by the applicant. So as seen in the elevations, the proposed dwelling is designed with split massing, flat roof lines, a 2nd-story rear terrace, a sunken garage, and will be primarily clad in wood. And shown here is a streetscape elevation, demonstrating the relationship between the subject property and neighboring 275 Cloverdale, which is the adjacent Grade 1 property to the south. The distance between the proposed dwelling and the abutting lot line is 4.5 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires 12 meters and the current condition provides 3.9 meters. So a subsequent minor variance approval will be required for the reduction in the rear yard setback. In terms of height, this graphic shows geodetic elevations demonstrating that the proposed dwelling is 7.72 meters tall at its peak, measured from the average grade, which is approximately 0.59 meters taller than the midpoint of the roof of 275 Cloverdale Road. Notwithstanding, the garage portion of the proposed house, which immediately abuts the adjacent grade 1 property, is approximately 1.79 meters shorter. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are supportive of the proposal and are of the opinion that it adheres to the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan guidelines relating to the demolition of existing buildings, the construction of new buildings, and landscape guidelines for buildings, new buildings and additions. Heritage staff are supportive of the applicant's proposal for the following reasons. The existing dwelling is of little architectural significance. The proposed dwelling will be replaced by a dwelling that is distinguishable as contemporary in its design and compatible with the heritage attributes of the Heritage Conservation District in terms of its massing, overall height, and setbacks. And the proposed landscape design conserves the cultural heritage value of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District by maintaining a dominance of soft landscaping and uses interventions such as hydro excavation and the use of helical piles to protect the existing tree canopy. The proposal is also consistent with Standard 1 of the Standards and Guidelines for the Conservation of Historic Places in Canada. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one more slide. So this application, the materials for this application were posted on the city's development application search tool. The Rockcliffe Park Residents Association participated in the pre-consultation pilot program and provided joint comments with staff in this process. And the association's environment committee also attended an on-site tree meeting with the applicant and our city forester to advise on a tree protection and replacement strategy. They were also notified of the application, but did not provide formal comments. Heritage Ottawa was also notified of the application and provided comments and support. And neighbors within 30 meters and Chair King were also notified. Next slide, please. So Heritage staff are recommending approval of the application to demolish the existing grade 2 dwelling and construct a new two-story split level dwelling at 321 Cloverdale with associated landscaping. Heritage staff are also requesting that authority be delegated for minor design changes and that the heritage permit be approved with a 2-year expiry date. Next slide, please. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, so for a wonderful first presentation that you provided to the subcommittee. It's much appreciated, very in-depth and very informative. We did receive correspondence from a number of residents as well as Heritage Ottawa on this file, and we do have a number of registered speakers, including Christopher Simmons of Christopher Simmons Architects Incorporated, who is first to provide a deputation.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I indicated to the coordinator that I'm here solely to answer questions. I feel that Mr. Juarez's presentation is fully adequate, but if the committee or yourself have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And I see no questions from the subcommittee. So thank you, Mr. Simmons. We also do have Mr. Fleming from Heritage Ottawa also registered to speak.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this application. Heritage Ottawa is pleased to support this proposal, which appears to meet the requirements of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan, Statement of Cultural Heritage Value, and Heritage Attributes. The proponent is to be congratulated for having involved the Heritage Committee of the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association in developing this application. Although modernist replacements are suitable for new buildings in this Heritage Conservation District, they provide a special challenge to property owners to propose designs which are harmonious with the existing building and other properties in the neighborhood. Provisions for a generous landscape are enhanced by the presence of mature trees. This proposal provides for a suitable replacement that respects the height, setback, landscape, and materiality as required by the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation Plan, Statement of Cultural Heritage Value, and Guidelines. We urge the subcommittee to recommend the staff's report's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming.
Excuse my voice. The air conditioning is getting to me.
Well, you'll have to tell us whether I should be calling upon you for each file.
Well, that's okay.
We want to conserve that voice, of course, as well as our heritage resources throughout the city. So, and we consider you one of them. And no insult intended there. Just obviously tell us if you want to participate on all of the elements. But does anybody around the table here have any questions for Mr. Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff on this item? And I see no hands raised. Do any of the members have any comments on this item just generally?
Let's carry it.
Seeing no hands raised, is the report carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. This report is scheduled to be presented to council on June 23rd. The next item in front of us, item number 2, is an application to alter 8 Briarcliff Drive, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Briarcliff Heritage Conservation District. We did receive a number of correspondence that were submitted to the clerk's office that have been circulated to all members of the subcommittee. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Through you, Chair. Good morning, councillors and members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. This item concerns the application to alter 8 Briarcliff Drive, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Briarcliff Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The property known as 8 Briarcliff Drive is located on the south side of Briarcliff Drive between Blair and Burrows Roads in the Rothwell Heights neighbourhood. It is classified as a contributing property in the Briarcliff HCD. Next slide, please. The main house on this property was constructed in 1969 and is an example of modern experimental architecture that defines the Briarcliff HCD. The property contains a 2-story cubic-shaped residence with a low hipped pyramidal roof. The main living space of the house is on the 2nd story, with the main entrance reached via a long set of steps. The ground floor contains a garage with 2 doors. A separate detached garage was constructed on the west side of the main house in 2016. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing several alterations to the property, including the rehabilitation of the existing home, the demolition and reconstruction of the side garage, the construction of a 2-story rear addition, and landscape alterations, including an in-ground pool and construction of a storage shed. The height, form, and footprint of the existing house will not be altered. Next slide, please. The proposal to rehabilitate the existing home includes the removal of the front steps and the relocation of the front entrance from the 2nd story of the house to the ground floor. The front entrance and existing garage doors will be replaced with windows. Although this proposal involves the alteration of the arrangement of the front entrance, Heritage staff are supportive of this proposal as it does not detract from the overall design and arrangement of openings on the front facade. It is mitigated by replacing the existing front door with a full-length window of similar size and shape, and the alteration is necessary as a practical and user-friendly adaptation to ensure the long-term reuse of the existing building. Next slide, please. The proposed rear addition will feature a flat roof and will be clad in a combination of wood and brick. The 2nd story of the addition will have a larger floor area than the ground floor and will cantilever above it. Next slide, please. The renderings on this slide demonstrate the proposal without cladding materials. A proposed in-ground pool will be located behind the new addition and will be surrounded by new plantings. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are supportive of the proposal insofar as it is consistent with the Briarcliff HCD plan guidelines relating to windows, entrances, additions to contributing buildings, garages, carports and accessory buildings, and landscaping. Heritage staff are supportive of the applicant's proposal for the following reasons. The alterations proposed conform with the policies and guidelines of the HCD plan and are necessary to ensure the long-term reuse and adaptation of the original building. The proposal maintains and enhances the cultural heritage value of the HCD as a whole. The replacement of deteriorated elements such as doors, windows, and roof shingles will be compatible with and not detract from the heritage value of the original. The proposed rear addition has been carefully designed so as not to compromise the design intentions of the original and to ensure that it remains subordinate to, distinguishable from, and compatible with the original. The proposed materials are appropriate and the existing landscape features of the lot will be substantially preserved and enhanced. Next slide, please. The proposal also conforms with standards 1, 11, and 12 of the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Next slide, please. The plans associated with this application were posted on the city's development application search tool. The Rothwell Heights Property Owners Association, Heritage Ottawa, and neighbors within 30 meters were notified of the application, and Councillor Tierney is also aware of the application. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are recommending approval of the application to alter 8 Briarcliff Drive on condition that the applicant provide samples of the final exterior materials for approval of Heritage staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. Staff are also recommending that authority be delegated to approve minor design changes and that the heritage permit be approved with a 2-year expiry date. Next slide, please. That concludes this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian, for the very in-depth report. As I had noted before, we received 3 items of correspondence that were submitted to the clerk's office, and we have a number of registered speakers. The first delegation is Gabriel Fono.
Hello. Sorry, I had some connection issue. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to talk to the committee this morning. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city staff for the collaboration during the development of this proposal. It's been a challenging process for us, be an heritage project and a development of alteration of this magnitude. Essentially, my presentation this morning is simply to address a point in the recommendation. I'm not sure if it's a typo, but there is a condition in the recommendation, and the condition says that the heritage permit is approved with the condition that we provide the cladding material to the heritage staff before the approval of the building permit. And I want to address this particular point. So what it means is that before we get the building permit, we need to go back to the heritage staff and provide them the choice of wood, stucco, or brick. It could lead to potential issue in the sense that, let's say, for example, at the building permit approval stage, we make a choice of cladding material, like, for example, a certain type of brick. But when we come to build, that material in particular we submitted, price increased so drastically like we're seeing with the lumber, like wood. This day, for example, 6 months ago, the 2x4 cost was $2 per square foot, $2 for an 8-footer. But today, the 2x4 is almost $10 for an 8-footer. So if that were to happen, for example, for the choice of cladding material we made at the building permit approval stage, what we will do normally is to change the cladding material we made, and we will ask the city staff, we'll be forced in this point to go back and solicit an approval from the heritage staff for the cladding material. So in this case, changing the brick, which was initially approved. I see a potential issue. We discussed with Mr. Adrian about this potential problem earlier, and we understand that Mr. Adrian is very supportive and he doesn't see it as a restrictive condition. But the concern here is more if, for example, the officer in charge of the file was to change down the road, for example, or the officer was to understand this requirement differently. It could lead to potential delay because, for example, the officer in charge may reject for some reason the choice we made afterward, meaning changing the material for the reason I mentioned earlier. So this will increase the cost of our project if we were to do that during the construction phase, because the construction crew will be delayed and will escalate to more building costs for us. My suggestion for this recommendation was, if the city staff would like
1 minute left.
If the city staff would like to have a condition there, my suggestion would be to recommend the cladding material to be one of those approved in the Brackliffe Heritage Plan, which is stucco, brick, or wood. And the second point is, I think there is a typo. The garage we're recommending here, we propose, is a 10 by 10 and not a 7 by 10 foot. So it's a typo that was made because we changed the plan at the last minute. I think that's pretty much what I had to say this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fono, for your deputation. Are there any questions from the subcommittee for Mr. Fono? I see no raised hands, so the next registered speaker is Teoman Bayrek, who is the architect.
He called me this morning and told me that he's excused himself. He's not going to attend the meeting this morning.
Okay, well, thank you for that notification as well. So the next registered speaker that we have on for this file is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be fairly brief. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this application in Briarcliff, Canada's only modernist heritage conservation district. Heritage Ottawa was pleased to support this district's creation in 2013. This application is also the first for alterations to a home to be considered by the subcommittee and council since the HCD was established. We strongly support this application and refer to the recommendation of the Rothwell Heights Property Owners Association for some suggested changes to further enhance this proposal. Otherwise, we urge the subcommittee to support the staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Are there any questions for Mr. Fleming? Seeing none, our next registered speaker is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones from the Rothwell Heights Property Owners Association.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity first to comment on this application. Although we generally support the recommendations of the city staff report, because some members of the committee may be unfamiliar with the district, and because this is the first application in the Briarcliff HCD, we wish to provide some supplementary information. When designated in 2013 as a rare intact example of mid-20th century residential architecture and planning, Briarcliff became Canada's first HCD recognizing the modern movement in architecture. 8 years later, Briarcliff remains intact and remains Canada's only modernist HCD. The neighborhood has never experienced the demolition of an original home. And although 9 of its 23 homes have changed ownership in the 8 years since designation, this is the first application for alterations in the Briarcliff HCD to go before the committee and council. This is a rather unusual and unprecedented circumstance, we realize, in the case of most HCDs. And it points to the success of the original design covenants, which governed the creation of the neighborhood and which have largely been carried over to the Briarcliff HCD plan. In support of designation in 2013, the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada called Briarcliff, quote, an irreplaceable record of a specific and very special moment in time, and stated, again, quote, the character of the district is defined by the delicate balance between small, self-effacing modernist structures and a largely natural landscape, making it highly vulnerable to insensitive interventions. Removal of too many trees, oversized dwellings, or buildings designed without regard for the prevailing character of the area can all quickly destroy the integrity of the district. Regulatory protection is therefore vital to its continued existence, especially as current popular taste seems to favor houses of increasingly large scale and faux historical references. Preservation of the district's integrity is important to Canada's collective cultural heritage, end quote. Preservation of Briarcliff's integrity requires continued respect for its understated modernist style, the modest scale of its buildings, and its naturalized forested landscape, which supports the modernist ideal of living with nature. These were the primary considerations of the neighborhood's original design covenants and of the current Briarcliff HCD plan. Although the district was conceived as a cohesive ensemble, each home is unique in design and each lot unique in the character of its natural landscape. In the case of 8 Briarcliff, we support the rehabilitation of the existing structure in keeping with the Briarcliff plan and the recommendations of the city staff report. As a foundational principle, we particularly support the Briarcliff HCD bylaw section 226, which states that, quote, additions to contributing buildings may be appropriate, but special care must be taken in the design, scale, and siting of additions. Buildings in Briarcliff were sited to minimize their impact on the natural landscape and to maximize privacy between neighbors. These intentions must be considered when planning an addition, end quote. We note that the existing house has the smallest footprint in the HCD, and we therefore support the proposed addition, which will result in an overall footprint consistent with the size and scale of other houses in the district, thereby respecting a critical heritage attribute. Further, with regard to the proposed addition, we support its siting at the rear of the property, where it will be largely hidden from public view behind the existing house and stands of mature trees. In light of the circumstances unique to this property, we support relocation of the original front door from the second story to ground level directly below, removal of the non-original staircase and peaked entrance canopy, and replacement of the original door with a full-length window of the same dimensions, maintaining the fenestration of the original front facade. We also support the recommendation that original wood trim patterns on the existing house be retained, including the wood spandrel panels above the 2 new windows at ground level, as seen in document 7. However, to better retain the heritage character of the existing
45
house
seconds left.
and compatibility with the HCD, we would support the use of wood-framed windows with narrow profiles on the front facade, reserving the introduction of aluminum windows for the side facades in the new addition. We note that the landscape at 8 Briarcliff remains in largely original condition. Retention of trees is important to the heritage character of the district and continued privacy between neighbors. We support the clarification of planting and or replanting of native trees at the rear of the property to mitigate tree removals behind the existing house. And we'll be happy to provide a list through city staff of native trees. As the house has been standing vacant for nearly 3 years, area residents are looking forward to its rehabilitation and renewal with respect for its heritage character. In conclusion, we support the recommendations of the city staff report for conditional approval of this proposal. Thank you to the committee and city staff for your consideration.
And thank you, Danielle, for your very in-depth report and also for the letter that was submitted to the subcommittee through the clerk's office. Does anybody have questions for Danielle? And I do see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Jones, for that presentation. My question really deals with the portion of the original house, the facade, that is going to be the most visible to the public. I think the addition is very nicely tucked into the rear and has been designed to give prominence to the original house. We've also just heard from the owner, who has expressed concerns about having to commit to materials. And I think this is a good opportunity to get the Heritage Subcommittee of Rothwell Heights Community Association's opinion on the importance of that kind of exterior cladding, especially to the front facade, in order to what it contributes to maintaining some of the original values of this modernist property. So I just wanted to know if you had an opinion or not. Do you want to elaborate?
Yes, thank you for the question, Madam Vice Chair. Materiality is a major factor in the Briarcliff HCD and has been a major factor since the neighborhood was conceived. Exterior cladding materials were part of the original design covenants to which each owner in Briarcliff had to agree. And everyone had to hire a registered architect. That architect had to design and build with a very limited palette of materials and then present the proposed design before a committee for approval before any homes could be built. And the reason for those restrictive design materials was largely in order to provide cohesion between the homes in the district and compatibility with the natural landscape. And largely, one of the reasons, perhaps the biggest reason, that Briarcliff remains intact 60 years later is the success of those design covenants and their importance to the district. And they therefore have very appropriately been carried over to the Briarcliff HCD plan, which was very carefully considered and drafted to help guide appropriate change in the district going forward. So as the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada pointed out in 2013, insensitive interventions, which may very innocently happen, can very much destroy the integrity of the HCD, which consists of only 23 homes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for that question, Vice Chair Quinn. Are there any other questions from the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you so much, Ms. Jones, for your submission. Does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, my question is for Mr. Van Wyck. I'm just noticing in the letter that came in from the Rothwell Heights Heritage Committee reference to the windows, wooden windows versus aluminum windows. And I can see from the changes, the alterations made to the building in order to accommodate the new entrance and the removal of the garage from the main structure, which all makes sense. But I was just wondering, there's no mention in your report about what the materials of the windows. Can you elaborate?
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. So the applicant has indicated materials very broadly that they wish to use, which is why we've recommended the condition. They've indicated to us that they would like to replace the existing windows with aluminum frame windows. And although heritage staff would support retention of the original material, which is wood, the HCD plan does allow for alternative materials. And we believe that this proposal is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering if there was any discussion about retaining wood just on the front as opposed to the entire, the entire structure, addition included.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. There was no discussion about the front facade specifically, but we believe if this application is approved, we can work with the applicant on retaining those windows on the front.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question about materials, just coming back to that. I noticed in the drawings that the original building, it specifies the use of stucco. The brick and the wood is being proposed for the addition, which makes sense to keep it separate and distinct from the original building, which is, as we saw in the photographs, stucco. That I think is really important, that otherwise we're going to end up with a house that does not look anything like the original. So are you committed to stucco for the original portion of the house, of the building?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair, we are committed to replacing stucco for stucco on the original dwelling.
Okay, thank you. Just looking for confirmation on that. Thank you very much. Otherwise, I think a really good job and a really good design. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair Quinn. And I just had a really quick question for Adrian around the conditions. We heard the applicant talking about the potential removal of conditions, but the fact that there's the capacity to work with staff and also the concern that if any staff member changed, that the trajectory of the application and the way that the materiality selections go forward would change. I was just wondering if you could give us any insight into that.
Thank you, Chair King. So the condition that we're recommending is a standard condition that we often recommend for heritage applications. The applicants have indicated the proposed materials they wish to use only very broadly, so brick, wood, stucco, but have not selected the specific materials that they wish to use. And they haven't been indicated on the supporting documents associated with this application. So heritage staff need to be able to review and evaluate the specific details when they do come forward. And because this is the first full application in Briarcliff, we're taking specific care to ensure that materials that are chosen at the end of the day are compatible with the existing house and with the HCD plan as a whole.
Well, that's quite satisfactory to me. So thank you for that answer. Do any other members have any other comments on this item? And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair King. I would like to compliment Mr. Fono, the owner and builder of the extension and the renovation of this house. You may be surprised to find that the original architect, Brian McCloskey, was a colleague of mine. We actually practiced together in 1969, the year that this was designed. And I feel confident that he would be very happy to see the house rehabilitated, the original part restored in a way which would have met the vision that he had at the time. And in my view, the addition to the rear is very complementary. And I wouldn't even hesitate to assure you that if you chose to do the rear addition in stucco as well, Brian McCloskey would have been quite happy. That's my intervention. And it's very satisfying to see the work that was done by the Briarcliff Community, Rothwell Heights Community Association in having this Heritage Conservation District designated, and good luck to everyone. I'll be watching this one very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Podolsky, for that wonderful insight. So I do not see any other hands raised. So is this report carried?
Carried.
Carried.
This report is scheduled to be presented to Council on June 23rd. The next item before us, item number 3, is an application for demolition and new construction at 540 Lakehurst Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. There is a motion on this item regarding further analysis of the height of the proposed building. Could Vice Chair Quinn please introduce that motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair King. The motion reads, whereas report number, which we have before us, recommends approval of the construction of a new house at 540 Lakehurst Road, according to plans submitted by O'Keefe Fiorenza Design Group. Whereas the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association has raised concerns with the accuracy of the streetscape elevations submitted in support of the application for new construction. Whereas the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan requires that new buildings be consistent in height and massing with Grade 1 buildings in the streetscape. Whereas the house at 429 Lansdowne Road is a Grade 1 building in the associated streetscape, therefore be it resolved that recommendations 1, 2, and 3 be amended to add the following as a condition of approval. Conditional upon the applicant, in consultation with heritage staff, undertaking further analysis of the height of the proposed building as it relates to the height of the Grade 1 building at 429 Lansdowne Road, to ensure the proposed height is consistent with the height of the Grade 1 building and meets guideline 7.4.2-3 of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Quinn, for moving that technical amendment that ultimately it looks at requiring that the applicant, in consultation with heritage staff, undertake further analysis of the height of the proposed building. Can staff now please provide an overview of this report?
Good morning, Chair King, members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, staff, members of the public. Today, I will be presenting on the proposal for demolition and new construction at 540 Lakehurst Road in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. This proposal seeks to demolish the existing dwelling and to construct a new 2-story dwelling on the property. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District on the south side of Lakehurst Road, between Cloverdale Road and Lansdowne Road North. The property is identified as a Grade 2 dwelling within the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan. And next slide, please. The property is located directly south of the Rockcliffe Walk Club. To the east of the subject property is a 2-story dwelling located at 429 Lansdowne Road and identified as a Grade 1 property in the HCD plan. To the west is a single-story dwelling located at 534 Lakehurst Road, identified as a Grade 2 dwelling in the HCD plan. And next slide, please. The subject property presently contains a single-story dwelling constructed in 1958 in a bungalow style. The building has an irregular shape, low-pitched gable-on-hip roof, and the bottom 2/3 of the house are clad in stone, whereas the upper third is clad in stucco. The property features a large landscape front and rear yard, which includes large planting beds and several mature trees. And next slide, please. And this slide just shows the existing condition of the property, so showing the irregular shape of the property, as well as the size of the associated front and rear yards. And next slide, please. This image shows the proposed site plan. As illustrated here, the design of the proposed dwelling is fairly unique, incorporating 2 separate masses that are linked to form a single dwelling. So the darker mass, located towards the east of the property, is 2 stories in height, while the lighter mass, located towards the west of the property, is 1 story in height. The larger mass is set back to the same position as the existing dwelling, while the smaller mass is set back further from the large mass. These two masses are connected at 2 points. So the first is a small entrance vestibule, and the second is a central glass-clad hallway. The design meets all applicable zoning provisions for the area, and no other applications such as a minor variance are required to permit this proposal. Next slide, please. So this image shows the proposed front elevation. The design of the dwelling draws inspiration from the English Manor style dwellings prominent throughout Rockcliffe Park, but is executed in a contemporary fashion. The two masses both feature a front gable style, a front gable shape, and are clad primarily in a natural stone veneer. Some smaller portions of the dwelling feature stained wood siding and metal cladding, and the property features aluminum-clad wood windows throughout, and the front facade is accented by a chimney. And next slide, please. So this image shows the rear elevation of the property. So similarly, you can see some of the stained wood siding and metal accents throughout, but the primary cladding is still a stone veneer. And again, those gable, the front gable style design is carried through to the rear of the property. And next slide, please. And this shows the west elevation of the property. So again, some elements of wood siding, but primarily stone veneer. And the next slide, please. And this shows the east elevation. So again, primarily clad here in stone. And next slide, please. So this image shows an aerial view shot from Lakehurst Road. So here you can better see the two connection points which bring the two masses together, as well as the relationship of the building with the existing landscape. And next slide, please. So here is another view from Lakehurst Road, just showing the relationship with the street, as well as the shape and design of the dwelling. And next slide. And here's just another alternate view from Lakehurst. And next slide, please. And again, another view from Lakehurst, just showing an alternative view. And next slide, please. And here we have an aerial view from the rear. So you can see in the rear there is a landscaped area with landscape pavers that connects to the dwelling. And next slide, please. And here's just another alternate view of the rear shot from the ground level. And next slide. And similarly, another shot from the rear. And next slide, please. So this image shows the tree conservation map, which was provided by the applicant. 5 trees are proposed to be removed from the property. A 6th tree is identified on this map, but is located on the adjacent property at 534 Lakehurst. 2 trees are to be removed for construction purposes. One in the front is to allow for servicing connections to the new dwelling, and one in the rear is to allow for excavation to permit the new dwelling. The other trees have been identified by an arborist as having health issues requiring removal, and the applicant is aware of and will be seeking the appropriate tree removal permits for that. And next slide, please. This image shows the proposed landscape plan. So as of here, 2 trees are proposed to be replanted. As reflected in the conditions, the applicant will be required to plant additional trees to satisfy the requirements of the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan. And next slide, please. The following policies were consulted within the report. So guideline 7.3.1 of the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan for demolition and reconstruction, guideline 7.3.3 for landscaping, guideline 7.4.2 for guidelines for new buildings, and 7.4.3 the landscape guidelines for new buildings and additions. And next slide, please. Standards 1 and Standards 11 have also been identified as applicable standards from the Standards and Guidelines for the Conservation of Historic Places in Canada, and staff are satisfied that they have been met through this application. And next slide, please. So consultation, the plans for this property, for this proposal were posted on the City of Ottawa's development application website and were available for public viewing. A pre-consultation was held with the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association as part of the city's pre-consultation pilot program. And the RPRA has noted concerns with the height and massing of the proposed dwelling. Heritage Ottawa was also notified of this application. The ward councillor, Councillor King, is aware of this application, and neighbors within 30 meters of the subject property were also notified. And next slide, please. So staff do support the application as proposed. The application does conform with the policies of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. The design maintains the landscaping of the existing property and conserves the park-like setting integral to Rockcliffe Park. And the materials and proposed design are appropriate for and contribute to the character of the HCD plan. So as noted prior to the presentation, an additional condition is proposed to be attached to the recommendations. This will permit the city to further assess the relationship between the proposed dwelling and the neighboring grade 1 dwellings. Staff are satisfied that the proposed dwelling and the relationship is appropriate, but this additional condition will just give us some extra time to ensure that the requirements of the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan are met in full. So the recommendations as otherwise recommended are to approve the application to demolish the building at 540 Lakehurst Road with the aforementioned condition, to approve the application to construct a new building at 540 Lakehurst Road, again with that condition, to approve the landscape design for the new building, conditional upon, and next slide, Eric. Oh, there we go. Conditional upon the applicant providing heritage staff updated landscape plans which illustrate the planting beds to be retained on the property and all new trees to be planted, and also the applicant planting an additional 3 trees in addition to the currently proposed 2 trees to satisfy the Rockcliffe Park Heritage District Plan that requires that all trees removed are replaced in 1-to-1. And next slide, please. Finally, just standard recommendations to delegate authority for minor design changes to heritage staff and to issue the permit with a 2-year expiry date. And next slide, please. And thank you. That concludes the presentation on this file.
Thank you, Greg, for that very in-depth presentation. We did receive correspondence, 6 letters that were submitted to the clerk's office, as well as a letter from Heritage Ottawa. We have a number of registered speakers, and I think what I'll do is I'll just group them to people who want to speak to this specific file, and then at the end, I will call upon the people who might just want to be available to answer questions. So the first registered speaker is B. Hampson.
Thank you, Councillor King and BHC committee members and staff. And after much deliberation and dialogue, the Heritage Committee members of the RPRA have decided to mandate our chair, Linda DeCare, to present our views to the BHSC today. And we support her presentation, and we have all contributed to her remarks that are going to be made today. So thank you very much for your time, and Linda is our representative on this.
Thank you for that. So I assume that there would be no questions for this delegate. So we will move forward to John Stewart, who also wants to provide a deputation.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. I shouldn't, by this stage, be able to handle a Zoom call. I appreciate the opportunity to participate. And I was asked to have a look at the design and comment on it, and was surprised to hear that the Rockcliffe Community Association had raised concerns about the project. I thought that in a lot of ways, this particular design really captures the picturesque principles. It's as a piece of architecture, it could almost be illustrated in one of Loudon's texts on horticulture. It's an interesting split massing with the height and placement also split. It integrates and complements you have an existing mature landscape, and it incorporates that mature landscape as part of the architecture. The materials being used are all noble materials. They nice quality. There's a play between the east and the west building, with the west building set at a lower level to conform with the building beside it, and the building on the west is respectful and set at the same level as the grade 1 building next door. It's a project that I consider nicely done. It is in some ways the idea of having the two split buildings and the glass link. It has sort of a very contemporary feel to it. It also integrates well with the traditional materials and traditional styles within Rockcliffe Park. I agree with the city that the project should proceed. I think there has been some discussion about the height of the building next door, but I understand that when the documentation on the existing building plans, there was an error on the part of the architect of that existing building, and the height established was from the ground floor level as opposed from the geodetic location. So in fact, the height is incorrectly stated within the documents. I think that'll be cleared up fairly quickly, and should be able to satisfy that particular concern of the Rockcliffe Association. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Are there any questions for the deputant? Seeing none, the next person registered is Linda DeCare. Oh, and I think you're on mute, Linda.
Okay, Mr. Chair and members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. My name is Linda DeCare. I am the chair of the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association Heritage Committee. I am here representing the consensus of the RPRA Heritage Committee. The RPRA Heritage Committee supports the Heritage Branch recommendations based on the condition that the overall height of the new building from the average grade ground level to the top of the main roof ridge achieve the same height relationship demonstrated in the preliminary streetscape elevation by the applicant, which does not exceed, therefore, the equivalent height of the reference grade 1 building at 429 Lansdowne Road North. We are reassured by the applicant's demonstration of the height limitation in response to the requirements of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan 7.4.2, Article 3. We therefore ask that the city issues a conditional heritage permit allowing the applicant to discharge the condition upon the submission of a verified height survey by a registered land surveyor of 429 Lansdowne Road North, and confirmation of the overall height of the proposed building in order to show the intended height limit will be achieved. Thank you, and this was from all members of the RPRA Heritage Committee: Michelle Collum-Heyman, John Cook, Marianne Fever, Danielle Goldberg, B. Hampson, and Michael Kellen, and of course, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for that deputation. Does anybody have any questions for Linda? I did have one, seeing no hands raised. I know that the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, as you have noted, raised concerns regarding the accuracy of the heights depicted on the streetscape elevation for 540 Lakehurst. Obviously, there has been an introduction of a motion that would address this condition. I just wanted to know whether you feel that the motion, the amending motion before us today, satisfies the concerns that you've expressed concerning the height issue.
It is an excellent motion that we welcome. I would like to simply repeat that we ask that the city issue a conditional heritage permit, allowing the applicant to discharge the condition upon the submission of a verified height survey by a registered land surveyor of 429 Lansdowne Road North, and confirmation of the overall height of the proposed building in order to show the intended height limit will be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you for that confirmation. So seeing no other questions, we do have a number of other people who have made themselves available to answer questions. That includes Dylan O'Keefe of the design group, and also we have James Lennox. And so does the subcommittee have any specific technical questions for these potential deputants? And I do see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question really pertains more to the landscape proposed. The property as we see it now has very much sort of a woodland setting kind of landscape, which is quite different from the rendering that we have had presented to us. And of course, I understand what, you can't go into that kind of detail, but I'm just wondering if there is a strategy around trying to preserve some of that character that is currently very much prominent when you see that property.
Is that a question for James Lennox?
Well, you tell me, whoever's best qualified.
Basically, our approach to, I didn't know if Dylan was going to pick up on it, but our approach to the landscape design was that the landscaping is essentially completed on the house, and we've actually worked on other projects in Rockcliffe over the years where we've built a new house where there was an existing house, and there's nothing that makes the house seem more established than preserving as much of the existing landscaping as possible. So that's the intention, is to basically keep as much of the existing landscaping as possible. We're going to have to remove some of the woodland landscaping in the front yard area, that a lot of it which is on the city right of way, that is going to basically be compromised due to the servicing of the site. So the intention was basically to move that woodland landscaping, or that foundation planting that's at the front of the house, and move it basically closer towards the house next to the front entrance to create to frame the house and tie it to the ground was the intention, really. But yeah, no, the idea was to basically make the house look like it's always been there when it's completed, and not to make it look like something that is new or basically been, I guess, just superimposed on the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other hands raised. So thank you to both the delegates for entertaining that question. We do have one other registered speaker who is David Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Demolition and replacement of buildings in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District offer a special challenge to provide a new building with a design that harmonizes with the height, massing, and scale of both the original building and neighboring homes, and the dominance of softscape over landscape. We feel that this proposal appears to meet these requirements. Based on the documentation, however, we are not convinced that the building being proposed meets the requirements under the plan. And we therefore feel that the Heritage Association has made persuasive concerns that should be addressed about the actual height in relation to the existing buildings. We would therefore support the motion by Carolyn Quinn that, that any approval be made conditional on addressing these issues. Otherwise, we support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Are there any questions for Mr. Fleming? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Member Hassel has raised her hand.
Yes, I just had a couple of quick questions. One on the landscaping. I notice the original building has a nice mix of staged landscape that extends from the city right-of-way in a series of beds that tie right back to the house, which is quite set back, whereas the new proposal seems to, as the architects have indicated, mass all of the landscaping along the front facade of the building. This leads to the creation of a very open, grassy area in front of the building. I was wondering if city staff have any comments on the retention of some landscaping closer to the road.
Yes, so we did raise that with the applicant, and due to the majority of that landscaping you're speaking of existing within that right of way, some of that can't be conserved when it is taken up to allow for those servicing connections. However, the applicant has agreed to, in response to the conditions contained within the report, extend the landscaping away from just the front facade of the house and out towards the front property line and along the proposed driveway as well. So there will be additional landscaping beds larger than those contained within the landscaping plan that's contained within the report.
Perfect, thank you. And my other question for you is if you could just summarize the discussions you've had with the community association and the architecture team on this height discrepancy.
Yes, Dylan, Eric, do you think you'd be able to put the slides up actually one more time?
Which slide?
I have slide 29, please. Sorry, the next slide, slide 30, actually. Maybe, oh, Eric, my apologies. It's slide 28 is the graphic I'm looking for. There we go. So this is the height comparison that the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association was referring to, that they did raise issues with the accuracy of. So basically this was included as part of the completed application package, and the applicant put this together using some of the data that they had available to them, and Dylan would be able to speak to this a little bit more accurately in terms of how he put these images together. But essentially, as part of the commenting process, the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association raised concerns that the perceived height of the proposed dwelling is greater than what is shown in this illustration. Following that, we had discussions with the applicant, and we were satisfied that the heights were accurate. However, in response to Rock Park's concerns, we wanted to add this additional condition simply to just take the extra step, get a little bit more specific information on the subject property and the adjacent property's relationship to confirm that those requirements of the HCD plan were met in full.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Hassel, and I see that Member Conforti has raised her hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to clarify with staff. So if in fact this this motion is passed and this additional condition is placed on the heritage permit, typically I realize that the application or the design wouldn't come back to this committee. But if you were to find that the height, was not conforming and there were some changes to the design, I just want to clarify that the committee would just be able to review the altered design, knowing that the permit would already be in place, but just kind of for our information purposes.
Mr. Chair, I'll take this question. So our intention here would be, with this motion, would be that if there were any changes required to the design, that they would be dealt with through the recommendation 4, which is delegated to staff. So at this point, we had not intended to bring back to the subcommittee. That being said, if there were significant changes that go beyond what we would consider to be minor design alterations, then it would be required to come back. But we feel fairly comfortable that this is, that there likely won't be any changes, but we need to confirm that. And that's why we included the motion, just to ensure that the information that's been presented is accurate, and that the height of the new building will be compatible with the associated streetscape.
Great. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you for that, Member Conforti. And I did see, I believe that Councillor Gower had raised his hand. Just wanted to see if he still wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair, but no, the previous committee members had covered what I was looking for. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Do any of the members have any other comments on this item? And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, my only comment is that this house design seems quite appropriate for the Rockcliffe Heritage Conservation District, and I'd like to compliment the owner and the designers and the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association for working together with city staff in bringing forward a proposal that I think is very handsome, and let's just hope that it forms a, it was executed quite quickly so that those members of the Rockcliffe Park Tennis Club won't be disturbed during too many summers by the construction activities. And I have to declare interest, I'm one of those players.
Thank you, Member Podolsky, for your comments, and I would like to echo a specific comment around staff working very closely and diligently with the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association to come to an accommodation. I'm very thankful for the work of both staff and the Residents Association on this file. So if there are no other comments from members, is the motion carried?
Carried.
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 Is the report carried?
Carried.
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 Thank you for that. Carried. This report is scheduled to be presented to Council on June 23rd. The fourth item in front of us is an application to alter 470 Acacia Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This item concerns the application to alter 470 Acacia Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The property known as 470 Acacia Avenue is located on the east side of Acacia Avenue between Hillcrest and Buena Vista Roads in the Rockcliffe Park neighborhood. As the map on the right of the slide shows, the property is indicated in red, meaning that it is classified as a Grade 1 contributing property in the HCD. Next slide, please. The main house on this property was constructed in circa 1909 by Alan Kiefer in the Tudor Revival style. It is a two-story residence with a center hall plan and steeply pitched roof. The first story of the house is clad in stone and the second story is clad in stucco, separated by wood banding. Next slide, please. A large wing on the south side of the house, added in 1970 and altered in 1985, contains a double-car garage clad entirely in stucco. In 1993, a one-story addition was constructed at the rear of the house. The landscape features of the property are typical of Rockcliffe Park and match those of its neighbors along Acacia Avenue. The front yard contains several mature trees and a semicircular driveway. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing several alterations to the property, including the construction of an in-ground pool in the rear yard, a single-story loggia at the rear of the house, the expansion of an existing rear terrace, alterations to the exterior of the existing home, including new windows, garage doors, and roof canopies, the construction of a one-story and two-story rear addition to replace the earlier one-story addition constructed in 1993, and the construction of a detached seasonal garage in the rear yard. Next slide, please. The following slides show the elevations submitted by the applicant. The west elevation seen here shows the front facade of the house. The red box indicates the location of the proposed loggia, which will be slightly visible from the front. The impact of the loggia's visibility is mitigated in part by existing landscape features in the front yard. Next slide, please. The south and north elevations show the sides of the house. The proposed additions and loggia are indicated here in the red boxes. Next slide, please. This rendering shows the rear of the house as proposed with additions on the left and new loggia on the right. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are supportive of the proposal insofar as it adheres to the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan guidelines relating to conservation and maintenance of windows, alterations and additions to existing buildings, garages and accessory buildings, and landscape guidelines for new buildings and additions. Heritage staff are supportive of the applicant's proposal for the following reasons. The alterations proposed to front and rear windows will be compatible with the original home. The proposed addition will be subordinate to, distinguishable from, and compatible with the existing building. The proposal respects the heritage attributes of the original home, the associated streetscape, and the HCD. The proposed materials are appropriate and compatible with the existing house, and the proposed landscape alterations will not result in the significant loss of soft landscaping or obstruct the landscape attributes of the lot or the HCD. Next slide, please. The proposal is also consistent with standards 1 and 11 of the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Next slide, please. The plans associated with this application were posted on the city's development application search tool. The Rockcliffe Park Residents Association Heritage Committee was notified of the application and provided comments. Heritage Ottawa and neighbours within 30 meters were also notified of the application, and Chair King is also aware of the application. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are recommending approval of the application to alter 470 Acacia Avenue. Heritage staff are also requesting that authority be delegated for minor design changes and that the heritage permit be approved with a 2-year expiry date. Next slide, please. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian, for once again another in-depth presentation. We did receive one letter in terms of correspondence submitted to the clerk's office from Heritage Ottawa, and we do have a number of registered speakers, and the first speaker is Andre Goudin. And I believe you're on mute. Sorry.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Sorry to delay things. I don't have any more to add to the great presentation that Adrian just did. I'm, however, here just to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you for that. I don't see hands raised. I just wanted to ask you also quickly whether the owner was also potentially registered to speak, but was not confirmed. So I don't know if the owner is here today.
He won't be speaking. He is just participating as far as.
Okay, so I appreciate that bit of information as well. Seeing no questions from the subcommittee, thank you. The next registered speaker is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a well-designed alteration to an important heritage asset in the Heritage Conservation District. And Heritage Ottawa is pleased to recommend this excellent proposal. We feel that the proponent has given consideration to some of the Rockcliffe Park Resident Association's concerns regarding the increase of soft landscape by reducing some of the initial proposed hard landscaping components. This has resulted in an improved proposal. We feel that the proposal could be further enhanced by perhaps incorporating additional RPRA suggestions contained in document 8, especially relating to the side yard setback of the proposed loggia and further changes in the proposed family room and the new terrace, all of which would greatly improve the proposal by changing hardscape to greenscape, and at the same time offering increased amenities to the property owner. Again, we support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Fleming, for the umpteenth appearance, especially under the circumstances, but we do appreciate you being here with us. Any questions for Mr. Fleming? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see no raised hands. Oh, I do see Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I'm wondering why we did not see a rendering of the front of the building. We had a couple of the rear of the building. It would have been nice to have seen something showing the front, which is, of course, the view, the public view of the house.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. The applicant didn't provide Heritage staff with a rendering of the front, but we feel this is okay in the circumstances because very, very minor alterations will be made to the front facade of the house. It's only on the 1970s addition that some windows and doors will be changed.
But just, for future reference going forward, as we like to say, that should be included in these reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and comment, Vice Chair Quinn, and I actually concur with you that we should get all the renderings before us when we're making decisions on these reports. Are there any other questions to staff? Seeing none, do any of the members have any general comments on this item? And I see no hands raised, so is this report carried?
Is carried.
Carried. This report is scheduled to be presented to Council on June 23rd. The fifth item before us is an application to alter St. Mark's Church located at 325 Elgin Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act in the Minto Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Good morning. Okay, this is an application to alter 325 Elgin Street, a property located in the Minto Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. This property, known as St. Mark's United Church or Église Unie St. Mark, is located at the edge of the Minto Park HCD at the intersection of Elgin and Lewis Streets. The Minto Park HCD abuts the Centertown HCD in this location. The Minto Park Heritage Conservation District was designated in 1988 for its cultural heritage value as a residential area surrounding a planned ornamental park with intersecting paths, trees, and planting beds. Next slide, please. The church was constructed in 1900 with designs by Rinaldi and Ewart. The building features stone construction, broad half-timbered gables, and a corner tower topped with a pyramidal roof. The church is a key corner landmark announcing the symbolic entrance to Minto Park, which contains a cohesive streetscape of low-scale buildings surrounding a planned square. Next slide. The application is in response to a recent partial collapse of the church tower. In early 2020, Heritage staff were informed that there was significant cracking in the church tower, which required immediate action. In consultation with Building Code Services, Heritage staff approved a bracing of the tower while a long-term solution for repair was planned. A Heritage permit for this bracing was issued under staff's delegated authority in November 2020. In April 2021, Heritage staff were informed of further cracking on the tower. The church's engineer noted that much of the tower must be dismantled in order to prevent collapse. In order to remedy an unsafe building was issued by Building Code Services on April 9th, 2021. With direction to immediately secure the tower and close Lewis Street to traffic. Despite not having finalized plans, the public safety concerns and the Building Code Services order to remedy an unsafe building necessitates bringing the application forward today. Next slide, please. In order to make the building safe, much of the church tower needs to be removed. The green highlighted section of the image shows the extent of the proposed demolition. Next slide. Due to financial constraints and the urgency of this work, the church is unable to commit to rebuilding the tower at this time. Heritage staff have therefore been working with the property owner on plans for an alteration to the church building to accommodate the partial demolition of the tower, the repositioning of the entrance. This will allow the continued use of the church until a time when the tower can be rebuilt. Next slide. These alteration plans are not yet finalized. However, staff recommend that council delegate the authority to approve the final plans to staff, including minor changes from the draft plans currently submitted. Next slide. Given the safety threat, Heritage staff do not object to the partial demolition, providing the following conditions are met. A, all usable stones are documented and salvaged. B, salvaged stones are stored and protected from weather. C, all usable stones are used in the reconstruction of the church tower at a later date. D, the church entrance is rebuilt in accordance with plans to be approved by staff under delegated authority. E, the owner enters into and registers a title on covenant agreement with the city under the Ontario Heritage Act to ensure the reconstruction of the church tower prior to any further development on the subject lands. And finally, F, that the owner pays the applicable minor alteration application fee. The church tower is one of the defining features of the building and the HCD, and as such, staff believe it should be reconstructed at the first possible opportunity. Next slide. Heritage staff recommend to approve the application for partial demolition of the church tower, to delegate authority to make changes to the final interim condition, and to direct the city solicitor to place the bylaw for enactment on the council agenda to delegate the authority to negotiate, finalize, and register a covenant agreement under the Ontario Heritage Act to ensure the reconstruction of the tower at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for that very important report on one of Ottawa's great landmarks. We do have one letter of correspondence that we did receive from David Fleming of Heritage Ottawa, and Mr. Fleming is also registered to speak on this item as well. So I would invite him to speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to heartily support this recommendation and to thank city staff for the way in which they've handled this unfortunate situation. I think this approach should provide a standard on how the city deals with other properties, including those in which owners fail to take necessary action to prevent their preservation. I know this has been a challenge for the city over the last few years, and I think this offers a good model. And again, many thanks and congratulations to the staff for how they handle this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Are there any questions for the delegate? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I do see that Member Hassel has raised her hand first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on the design that was proposed. It looks as though the base of the tower is to be incorporated into that. Well, the remaining base of the tower is to be incorporated into the entrance. And I think that's a very, very thoughtful touch to salvage what can be from this unfortunate incident. I live around the corner and have been watching it over the past year. So it's really great to see this starting to see some resolution and the collaboration between the church and staff. So just wanted to draw attention to that, that thoughtful use of what can remain.
Thank you for that comment. And we also have Member Podolsky who has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair King. I think, like others, we are disappointed that the condition of the tower has resulted in the need to demolish it. Very much like the upper part of the Museum of Nature when it was dismantled, around 1916. I think that the action that the city is taking in terms of putting a condition on title to ensure that the tower is reconstructed when any further development happens in the property, I think that's reassuring. However, I think that given that this is a nonprofit charitable organization, being the church, the city might want to actually take a much stronger proactive initiative, perhaps engaging with the city's economic development department and its partnership program to seek ways in which the church's congregation's objectives and sustenance can be complemented with some form of other partnership that would bring financing to this property in order to not only reconstruct the tower, but to ensure that the form of the original church, which is part of this landmark location, is reassured in the long term. So it's really about encouraging staff to be proactive in engaging other parts of the city's agencies, such as the Economic Development Department, to see whether or not the site can be revived for its original use or for mixed uses in a way that the form of this corner landmark for the Heritage Conservation District is brought back to its contribution to Centertown, which desperately needs to conserve as much of its history as possible. I don't know if there would be a need for a motion of the Built Heritage Subcommittee to engage us, or just staff assurance or Councillor McKenney's assurance that there will be some proactive work undertaken by the city to try to mitigate and reinstate the value that this landmark has contributed to Centertown. So I look to Councillor McKenney to comment on that.
And I'd invite Councillor McKinney to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've worked with staff through this. It's unfortunate circumstance that we would lose a landmark piece of architecture on Elgin Street especially. And as we know, we've got other properties in the downtown, and include the neighboring ward, two neighboring wards where we've lost heritage properties, parts of them, and we have no assurance of reparation or rebuild. So I think that in this case, the fact that we are retaining the stones, the brickwork, and that there are significant conditions being placed on the property owners here, I feel, as the ward councillor, confident that we will see something in the future. Certainly am not aware of the church's finances and how we'll move towards that, but I am confident that the outcome here will be very different than in other circumstances. I'm not sure if that is completely what Member Podolsky was looking for. But.
Mr. Chair, it was just the suggestion that engage the city's economic development department to come up with ideas that might be helpful in this circumstance. And if that was possible, I think that they may contribute some added value.
So I would just ask our committee coordinator whether it would be appropriate to seek a direction to potentially see if there could be some work with the economic development side staff at the city on this item. And I see that Leslie has raised her hand to comment.
I'll leave it to Leslie in that case, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to, I don't raise my hand very often in these meetings, so I was like trying to find the button, and I thought you can probably see me, so I'll just physically raise my hand. Just maybe before Mr. Pillow comments, I would just say that I think there's a lot of pieces of this puzzle that are still to come. This report has been brought forward due to the urgency and the safety issues. I mean, obviously, if the committee wishes to put forward a direction, it's welcome, but we do have a lot of discussions to continue to have with the church. There's a lot of the sort of detailed pieces about negotiating a covenant and that sort of thing still to come. So I think I'd just like to assure the committee that, part of the reason that we put forward the recommendations we did were in recognition of the fact that, this is a church, and churches, like many other gathering places, have been adversely impacted by COVID. And we still think that, the best use for a church is a church. It's a gathering place. And we're hoping to try to do what we can through this application to allow it to continue to function as a church. So we will be assisting them, however we can to not put an undue burden on them, and to hopefully the building can remain as a church in years to come. So we'll be engaging with our Building Code Services colleagues and our colleagues throughout the Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department to see what we can do. So I hope that answers Mr. Podolsky's question.
Well, I appreciate that answer, and so I'm assuming from what I heard, it might not be appropriate to have a direction at this time, noting that you are going to be working with economic development, planning, infrastructure in any event on this file. I'm wondering, as long as that is satisfactory to Mr. Podolsky, I don't want to presuppose what your intentions might be, but I just want to check with you, Member Podolsky, whether that is whether Leslie's explanation is satisfactory for you.
Yes, of course it is. And I wish us all very well on this one.
Okay. Excellent. So do any other members have any other questions of staff or any comments? Seeing none, is the report carried?
Carried.
So this
Carried.
This report is scheduled to be presented to council on June 23rd. There are no in-camera items to date, and there is an information previously distributed before us concerning the proposed Alexandra Bridge replacement. On this file, if there is any deliberation that is required, it would require a vote. So I just wanted to see if members were interested in having any deliberation on this item or are simply willing to accept it as is. And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the city staff and the mayor's initiative in seeking to become a stakeholder in the Alexandra Bridge replacement or conservation issue. I had a question, perhaps it would be something Leslie Collins could answer. Well, two questions. One is, is the city actually going to be able to obtain all the documentation that has been prepared by Public Services Procurement Canada? I noticed that there was reference to a single 2018 report, but there are 5 other reports that are known that deal with the condition of the Alexandra Bridge prepared by WSP Engineering and also other firms like MMN Engineering that were absorbed by WSP. My question is, have these reports become available yet to city staff for review? And I'm not just speaking of heritage staff, but the engineering staff that are capable of interpreting and commenting on the reports. So that's one question.
I suppose before we go too much further, I just want to also confirm with our committee coordinator whether that is a question more of clarification or whether that really kind of constitutes more deliberation on this motion, since these information items that come before us, these information previously distributed items, typically do require a vote for consideration. So I just wanted to see, get Eric's opinion on this, if these questions could be asked, or whether it does require that 2/3 majority vote for deliberation.
Chair, you're correct. The member's asking questions of staff, and so if the committee is agreeable to lifting the item for discussion, then it could proceed with that with those questions.
Okay, so that is my understanding. A motion pursuant to section 89.3 of the procedure bylaw is required for the committee to consider this information previously distributed, requiring a 2/3 majority vote. Since we have questions before us, I would present that to the committee, whether the committee would vote in favor for us to have a discussion on this item. And we have the motion before us. I'll read it. Whereas section 89.3 of the city's procedure bylaw states that, except as otherwise decided by a 2/3 vote of the members of committee / commission presenting and voting, the committee / commission shall not consider any report, information previously distributed, memorandum, or any matter that has not been distributed to the members with the agenda. And whereas the Built Heritage Subcommittee has received a public submission in respect to the proposed Alexandra Bridge replacement, file number quoted, listed as information previously distributed A on this meeting's agenda, as well as an expressed interest in speaking to the matter or answering questions should the committee wish to discuss the item. Therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to section 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, the Built Heritage Subcommittee consider the above information previously distributed A at this meeting.
Chair, if we could also confirm a mover.
And does anybody want to specifically move that motion? I know that Barry was interested in asking the questions. And you're on mute, Barry. I don't know if you're willing to move that motion.
Yes, I'd be happy to move it.
Okay. So is everybody in favor of this being discussed?
Yes.
I'm in favor.
Yes.
So that's approved. So we can now move forward with questions. And I know that Barry has a number of them.
Yes, I'll really make it quite simple. And the question is, what is the city's heritage and perhaps engineering program to become an informed partner or stakeholder in the process? What actions are the city so far planning to take on this? Perhaps Leslie, you can comment on that.
I'm actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to pass this over to Mackenzie Kim, who has been the heritage planner on this file, and she's been having lots of good meetings. So I'll let her answer that.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, it's a bit warm in my apartment today, so there's a fan going as well. So yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. We have had some great conversations with our colleagues in PSPC so far, and they have, and I should say they have also shared with us a number of reports that have been completed on the bridge. Many of them are to do with the condition. We have not shared them yet with our colleagues in engineering, but I think certainly we could have some further discussions about sharing those a bit more broadly within the department so that those experts can review those. And then just also to share that we have had those conversations with the director for the National Capital Region Bridges and her staff. And I believe two of her staff are on the call if there are specific questions this morning. But as I understand, the next sort of major part in the bridge project is for a larger impact assessment process to take place. And part of that, a heritage impact assessment will be prioritized through that. So we've had some discussions about heritage staff participating in the terms of reference for that, in reviewing the terms of reference, and also through the assessment of the study once it's completed to review the results and participate in how any recommendations can be implemented going forward. And I think PSBC has indicated that they would welcome city staff's participation through the project through various milestones as it proceeds. Thanks.
And I know that Member Podolsky, I believe you had another question potentially.
Yes, my second question is that in the information that was provided to the Built Heritage Subcommittee, staff were confident that the potential designation of the Alexandra Bridge would be likely to qualify under the Ontario Heritage Act regulations. And is there any hesitation by the staff to actually proceed with the report to bring to Built Heritage Subcommittee and Council a designation report?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, are you planning to do that?
So yeah, just to clarify, thanks for the question, Member Podolsky. So in the memo that we provided, we wanted to be clear that the Alexandra Bridge has municipal cultural heritage value and significance, and I would say national significance as well. And it would likely merit designation under Part 4. However, there are some jurisdictional issues, given that this is a federally owned asset. So it would be beyond the city's jurisdiction to bring forward a Part 4 designation under the Heritage Act.
Thank you for that. I don't know if any other subcommittee members have any questions on this specific file. And I don't see any hands raised. I just want to briefly comment that I think it is important that staff seek more information about this file. And I'm really pleased that we actually are seeking that additional assessment opportunity with Public Services and Procurement Canada to get a better understanding of the rationale for the potential replacement bridge. And also, it provides greater insight for both our subcommittee, the council, and the general public as to that rationale, as well as a better way on a wider scale to really understand the impact, especially when we have other proposals before us concerning rapid transit in the downtown core. So I'm very pleased that staff is seeking out more information and is working to liaise with the federal government to provide more input on this important file. If there are no other questions, we can move on with the end of the agenda. Notices of motion, there have been none to date submitted. Inquiries, there have been none to date. Under other business, there are 2 planning circulations on the agenda, which were distributed to members prior to the meeting. Members of the public have the opportunity to comment through DevApps on ottawa.ca, the City of Ottawa's website. An Ontario Heritage Act application would be considered at a later date. On the planning circulations, we do have a zoning bylaw amendment concerning 65 Stewart Street and also a zoning bylaw amendment concerning 126 York Street and 151 George Street. Is there any other business? Seeing none, on adjournment, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. You are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And the next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. So we get a break in July. So have a wonderful Canada Day if I don't see you. And I look forward to seeing everybody back in August.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.